Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Greenback Voyage. And today we're going to be talking about foreign policy and certain countries and how they're moving. Today we have Shravan and Joel.
Yes,
We also
sir.
have myself, Krishna.
Oh boy, it's gonna be a tough topic to talk about.
Yeah, Russia is making some big moves.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the Biden administration's kind of putting them on ropes now. You didn't see much of this with Trump and all.
Exactly,
So
because I think Biden is protesting the fact that Russia rigged the election, so they're kind of investigating into it a lot more compared to the Trump administration.
yeah, I mean, they hit back hard, didn't they? First, I think there's like 30 plus sanctions, and then they expelled like 10 plus officials.
And that's not
So,
the only thing. Russia has its own internal problems to deal with.
mm-hmm,
See,
that's
the
true.
rigging of the election stuff, like, it's not like we don't do that, right? We all do this, and we've already had, like, what, Robert Mueller's probe and a few other investigations done by special investigators, right? These are non-biased, non-party affiliation guys. The fact that they're going after this again, I mean, it seems like a dead end to me. Like, what are you gonna get out of this? We all know
It's
that,
for
like,
votes. It's for votes. It's kind of like to garner more trust for the Democratic Party, because the entire Republican Party kind of got defaced with the claims of a rigged election, right? So if the Democrats can capitalize on that, it bodes well for them in 2024. So it's honestly a political move if you
yeah, but
really look at it.
the whole Republican point was that the Democrats rigged the election, not the Russians. So to go after the Russians on this, it's just gonna divide, right? You're just gonna add gasoline on the fire of it already existing, like, call it like tension between us,
I mean, that's
right?
not the only thing, is it? It's also, I guess, U.S. military support. I mean, Biden, within his cabinet, or not within his cabinet, within his, close advisors, multiple military officials are within, talking range of him, potentially advising him to possibly just push forward against Russia and China. So we don't know what, internal stuff is happening within the White House itself.
And not just that, Biden always had like a interest in Ukraine per se, and due to that, it kind the fact that Russia is making a lot of aggressive movement in Ukraine kind of pushes the United States to act against them.
See, like, the whole Ukraine situation is just a classic problem. This happens in pretty much every other region. You have this country, right, that's kind of sandwiched between the EU and Russia. Like,
Hmm.
the left half is open to, well, in 2014 there was this deal that I think it was called, it was some long deal that they had. I'm not sure what the name is. I think, oh yeah, so the DCFTA, which stands for Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Areas. So the EU and Russia, or sorry, EU and Ukraine signed this deal, which allowed for free trade, like, people and goods can travel freely, and what that does is that paves a path for the Ukrainian government to join into NATO, right? And since it's sandwiched between Russia and the EU, that's going to give EU more influence because it's getting closer to Moscow, right? The whole area will be closer to Moscow, and the NATO's influence and EU's influence will be closer
But
to
didn't
Moscow.
this entire war in Ukraine start in 2013 just because Ukraine didn't want to join the EU and they wanted
So,
to improve relations in Russia?
right. So the thing, so there, so I think back in, so when the Soviet Union collapsed in the 1990s, or in 1991, actually, before that, so Soviet Union, they had a huge nuclear arsenal, right? Most of the nukes were actually, or not most, but a good amount of nukes were actually in Ukraine. And once the Soviet Union dissolved, Ukraine actually was left with these nukes, right? So what Ukraine did in 1991 or in 1995, they exchanged these nukes for a promise of Ukraine's sovereignty. So Russia had to recognize that Ukraine was an independent sovereignty. And they also officially did this in 2020 or 2000 when Russia signed a deal with the EU, right? So they're saying, okay, we support Ukraine's independence, and Ukraine will be able to make treaties with other countries, and they don't have to report. They don't have to, like, they're not under our jurisdiction. They're a free autonomous state. And in 2014, this new Ukrainian president, his name is Viktor. He was pro Russia. So So half the right half of Ukraine actually like has stronger ties to Soviet Russia. They speak Russian. Their whole culture is kind of is similar to Russian culture, right? They identify as like Russian, and then the left half is
Yeah, I
more
mean
Ukrainian.
that's why Putin tried to annex Crimea in 2014 is because
That was
his
an
basis
advantage.
is just his
yeah,
basis
and you
was
go.
that there's so many Russian nationals in Crimea that it's basically his property to take.
I mean,
And
Yes,
Russia also wants to kind of capitalize on the resources Ukraine has, because Russia has all the designs on Ukraine's natural gas pipelines. So if they can capitalize on that, that's a huge economic boost as well. So the war
So
is profitable overall.
so the gas pipeline that runs in Ukraine is actually Russian owned, right?
Yeah.
The Russia and EU actually operate that gas pipeline. Actually, 25% of the natural gas that goes through Ukraine goes to EU, right? The problem
Yeah.
with that was Ukraine was actually accused of siphoning off small amounts of gas from that pipeline, and they actually completely stopped it, right, to nearly zero. So no natural gas was actually flowing through the pipeline. What Russia ended up doing is they went to Turkey. So Turkey had this pipeline that went through the Black Sea, and it was a project that started in 2019, and I think it's in operation now, and now Ukraine doesn't have any natural gas pipeline that goes through it. Russia directly exports through the Ukrainian. I think it's called Turk Stream. They export it through the Black Sea to the EU. So
I think Russia's like thought process was that they always just thought that Ukraine was part of them because of the similarities in culture, the similarities, the linking of history between the two states, and plus Ukraine was also a former Soviet state, right?
right.
So now all of a sudden, if there's a revolution in Ukraine, that might force other regions in Russia who are also like dissident towards the government to form their own revolutions, and that's not the ideal situation that authoritarian rulers such as Putin want to have in their country.
Yes, so there was actually a revolution that happened in Ukraine like recently. It was called the Euromaidan Revolution. That was kind of prompted with the Ukrainian president that Viktor, when he said that because he was pro Russia and he wanted to back out of the EU deals, right? And Putin supported that obviously, and the EU didn't want it because if Putin gets control of Ukraine, he'll have more influence towards EU, right? Because of the geographical because of the strategic geographical area, right? So they actually had a revolution, and the majority of the population actually wanted to go back to Russia and become part of Russia. That actually happened, right? And there was actually a crisis that happened there. There was a crisis, and that's when Putin sent armed forces to annex Crimea. So Crimea is actually not part of like Ukraine when it comes to trade deals or any other deals. It's under Russia control. Right.
But
and
if you really think about it, right,
yeah.
Ukraine also has a decent amount of leverage over Russia. Because if you think about it, a lot of former Soviet states with like-minded policy, they have this bloc called the Eurasian Union, correct?
Right.
The Eurasian Union literally does not exist without Ukraine. Because Ukraine is one of the largest masses in the Union. They have significant influence, right? So if they back out, then the Eurasian Union, which is essentially led by Russia, which is the most powerful nation in the bloc, can't really pass any alliance-based policies. So that's why Ukraine also does have a decent amount of leverage over Russia just because of the alliance that they have.
Yeah, well, the only thing that Ukraine really has is the support of NATO and EU, right? Because
Yeah.
NATO and EU have their own interests, right? They're not going to give up Ukraine to Russia's control easily. That's not going to happen. Just because of where it is geographically, right? It's in a very, very powerful spot. It's under the Sea of it's right in between the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea, right? It's in a strategic point. So to give up Ukraine to Russia that easily, it's never going to happen. And that's the only thing that Ukraine has going for it, right? So that's why because if Russia were be able to gain Ukraine, if they were to be able to gain all of Ukraine's landmass, it's Russia will become really, really powerful in that area. So that's
and
why.
What do you think about the Russia closing down the Black Sea from warships? What do you think? Because Ukraine is claiming that this move is illegal, and they want to contest this at the UN, right?
Well, it depends on which part of Black Sea, like the northern part, like where
it's several areas, so I'm not really sure the exact location where they blocked it off, but it's multiple locations of the Black Sea, kind of just preventing warships from entering the region.
I think
So you can militarize in the Black Sea now.
Yeah, so I think I know which time you're talking about, the Kirk Strait, right?
Yeah.
That's the only like that water body that runs through the CFAs off in Black Sea. That is completely under Russian control, right? There's a lot of ports there, and this is at almost like 10,000 Ukrainian like I think there like almost 10,000 casualties because of this conflict. There were many, gunboats and patrol boats that are sent to that area, and Russia claims that it's illegal to enter that area, and they actually end up shooting those boats down.
And it still are. The thing is, what Russia's done is they've moved their troops back, but they still have so many military weaponization on the border that it's sort of like, you want to fight us? Go ahead. Like, see what happens.
No, and in
That's sort of
general,
what's
the
going on.
entire Crimean like coastline is blocked off, right? So if Ukraine wants to make a move in retaliation, they can't really do that in the region, at least navally.
That's true. I don't know. In my opinion, I think the major reason that Putin just, did all this in the first place, the 7-year war at this point, it's just because of the support that he's had, the popularity. I mean, I'm pretty sure, like, his ratings shot up after he went to go annex Crimea. And
Putin has a lot of similarities with olden Russian leaders in the USSR, right? Where they're a little expansionist, kind of similar to China, where they want to kind of collate all the previous Soviet states, because they've all had like their similarities, right? And create like this massive region, which China is kind of doing in like the South China Sea region and like a little bit in South Asia. So both of these countries are trying to like expand within Asia to compete against the United States. But I don't
Right,
really.
But I think the issue with Putin right now is he doesn't want a repeat of what happened in the first Crimean War back in, like, what was it, 1850? I mean,
the militarization of the closing down of the Black Sea to the Crimean coastline doesn't really help his case, because that's obviously gonna aggravate the Ukrainians a lot more.
Yeah. And Navalny is not really helping much here. I think, Putin just wants that support to show to the Russian people that he is the stable monarch of Russia for the future.
Yeah, and dissidence doesn't really help it out.
Yeah, especially with, like, the protests that we've been seeing in the past year now? Ever since his attempted poisoning. So that's a key thing for
Navalny
Putin
also
right now.
does have a point, though, because Russian prisons have historically been accused of mistreatment of
I mean, are you
their.
surprised?
I'm not. I'm not in any way. But the fact that someone's finally stepping up and protesting against the Russian government says a lot. That means the political status of, like, the political identification of a lot of people in Russia are changing.
I
Because
think
previously they were afraid of the government, right?
that is true.
Now
but
they're not.
The only issue I see now is we've seen his health deteriorate in the past year, ever since that nerve gas hit him, or
Yeah.
nerve poisoning attempt, whatever it was. And this hunger strike didn't really help much with it. So in the next 5 years, will Russia still have opposition from leaders like Navalny that will continue to destabilize internally in Russia?
So Navalny's the guy who got poisoned in UK, or some other guy?
He
No,
got
he's the
poisoned
guy
in
that-
Siberia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he's like a small opposition leader, right? He's been vocal about this shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he went to jail for like 2.5 years, and he got poisoned by like a nerve agent.
Okay.
And what happened is he was mistreated in prison, so he started a 3-week protest, hunger strike, I think,
okay. I think I know.
where he was like protesting for prisoner rights because they were being mistreated all the time.
Okay.
So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how this ends up being, because I think that's another one of the major reasons that Putin is backing out of Ukraine slowly.
This is one of the things that if Navalny dies, the global community is just going to sweep it under the rug, kind of like Jamal Khashoggi. Remember
Yeah.
when the
Yeah, no
Wall
one's
Street
gonna care,
Journal?
to be honest. That's
Yeah,
our turn.
because like, sure, there's opposition, right? but the voice is not loud enough and the group is not big enough. So
No.
to compete against the Russian government, you need a lot more like individuals, right? One dude doing a hunger strike is not going to help because all the other people are scared. Maybe in the next 10 years this might inspire some riots, but as of right now, I don't see any global response to this.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
which
been
which
small
country is
stuff
gonna
here
back
and
this
there.
guy? That's the truth. Like no other country is gonna. Let's say like some guy was
US
doing this
won't,
in
NATO
China,
won't. Yeah,
right?
Mhm.
they.
Then
I
someone
mean,
would.
it's
Some
been
power
happening in
would do
China.
it.
It's been happening in Hong Kong, and no one's doing anything.
Right.
We're just
You
all we're
can't.
saying is, oh shoot, that really sucks for them. But yeah, that's all we can say.
That's all you can say. That's nothing you can do about it. That's the
So do you
current
think there's going to
state
be
of the
like an
world.
all-out war in Ukraine?
No, no,
No.
not recently, or not soon.
Not
I don't
soon?
think so. No, there's no reason for that to happen. That's gonna hurt Russia actually.
It's been yeah, and secondly, it's been what 6 years, and they've just been stuck on that, that one straight. For how long now?
I mean, it's,
And
it's like the
no
same
one side
situation
is
with
gaining.
like Kashmir, right? Indian troops are
Mhm.
there, Pakistani troops are there. They're not gonna start a war. It's not that's not good for either side. It's just a
But that's a
show of
lot more
power.
volatile situation. In Kashmir, there have
Well,
historically been 3 wars. All 3 wars were literally stemmed from the Kashmir conflict
Well,
between India and
there's
Pakistan,
been
right?
not the same magnitude, but there's been armed conflicts in the Ukrainian border as well.
Yeah, but they weren't all-out wars where
Right,
the
but
entire
that's
military
what I'm
force
saying.
got involved.
Right.
So
But I
I
don't
would
think
say that
Russia
the
would go to
tensions
war.
are not as high. Yeah.
unless they do like a huge move. I don't think there's going to be any war.
I mean,
And
yeah. Another
also,
thing
NATO's
is-
not going to get involved to back Ukraine.
No, definitely not.
They won't risk
Yeah.
a war with Russia.
But Russia's also kind of going back into the Cold War philosophy where they're restarting the space race with their new alliance with China as well. Like, is SpaceX really that much of a threat? Like, I don't understand why the government has to compete for space dominance right
So
here.
I mean, this is okay. So a few years ago, we actually used Russian aircraft, a spacecraft to go, right, the Soyuz craft. And now we have the guys like Elon Musk who are now bringing as a private contractor. He's doing this. He's gone up to the ISS more than 2 times, right? He's brought people there too. So we don't need the Soyuz aircraft now. We have an aircraft that's made here, domestic, and it also is more safe than the other like the Soyuz.
But this is
spacecraft
different.
and-
It's not even the ISS. It's like the lunar moon station that everyone's saying will be completed by 2025.
That's
the
that's
main
really
thing right now.
optimistic.
I mean, yeah, it is really optimistic, but considering the fact that we haven't sent a man there since the 80s.
Well, we have no
It's-
interest, right? The whole point of going to the moon is just to make a statement. That's it. We had no scientific interest. That was kind of second.
I mean,
No, it
it
was
could
kind of true. Like, it
provide-
was literally a statement during
Yeah,
the space
it's literally
race.
a statement, right?
it could
Right,
still
but
provide
now-
support to us. I mean, in our mission to Mars. That's the thing. Because now the U.S. itself is one step closer.
No, but I'm saying in the 1960s when we first hit the moon.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's
That
more
was
of a
a statement.
Yeah.
Right now, it's more of like a colonial approach where both the superpowers kind of want to colonize certain planets. And they're working towards that, right? That's why they're kind of militarizing in space as well,
Look,
which I find
I don't-
ridiculous.
I don't think Russia or China have any interest in increasing their budget for the space programs. They're just leaving this just to separate themselves from the US. They're not going to go with China. They're not going to go restart their space programs with larger budgets. They're just doing this to cut ties with the US slowly, right? That's all I think. I don't think any country right now has interest to go to space, spend billions of dollars on that programs. There's no, I mean, you don't really need to, right? What's the point of going to space right now, putting in tens of billions of dollars?
Exactly, and that's
I'm
why
being-
America has
I'm
the
actually being
advantage in the
honest.
field. No, America has the advantage in that field because they have the capitalistic advantage, right? Most of the space companies right now that are profiting, like Iridium Technologies and SpaceX and Virgin Galactic with their new like spacecrafts that they're launching, right? All these companies are privatized, right? So the government, like NASA, is no longer really like funding more space projects. No, they're just leasing out their equipment and their intellectual property to other companies so they can capitalize on it. Whereas Russia and China still kind of operate in a not true capitalistic environment. So if there's a startup, right, that would want to start in China, it's much harder to do that in Russia or China than America. So are talking about the space race, right? The modern space race, which is where the private sector is a lot more involved in it, right? Russia, China has already lost in that aspect because America has a huge head start.
I mean, look, the whole reason for Russia to leave is kind of, we can't really blame them, right? Because we cut off ties with the Soyuz spacecraft once we got SpaceX. So we're like, we don't need Russia anymore for this spacecraft. We can just use our own domestic spaceflight or spacecraft to do this, right? So where would Russia go? They need business, and they need to. That's why they're going to China, right? That's why they're trying to collab with China.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is it's coming from the sanctions, I believe. That's the main reason why Russia and China kind of put this out. It's sort of like a force against the U.S., like Joel, you mentioned before, I think. It's just showing, like, you know, Russia and China are closer than what the U.S. and Russia are, or what the U.S. and China are. And, I mean, it'll be a force to reckon with. I don't think in the space race, but
it's more of
maybe in other areas.
It's more of, like, your friend... your enemy is my enemy type situation. I don't think Russia and China really are, you know, best friends.
They're
right?
not best pals, but they're definitely showing, like, if it comes to fruition, they will fight the U.S. over anything.
I mean, see, there have been research analysts who predicted that in the state of war, right, the U.S. can practically... No. I'm saying the U.S. can quite literally, with the amount of arsenal that they have, they can quite literally take on the entire world and still potentially win, right? So even if Russia and China do collaborate, America still has significant, like, military might that can counteract that. So while it is a significant threat because it's going to make America work a lot harder, it's not the most alarming thing.
Yeah, well, Russia is kind of isolated now. That's the whole problem. That's why they're going to China. We have, if you look at the space programs, we have NASA, European Union has the ESA, Russia has their own Soyuz programs and their own space program. China does. It's not as big as ours or any of the other ones, but India has one. And we're kind of going much further ahead than where Russia is. And we have NATO. Russia's not part of NATO, right? We have an alliance. Russia, they're not part of EU, right? So in terms of alliances and growth, Russia is lagging behind than the western part of the world. So that's why they're going to China to try to come up with a sort of an alliance, right? It's kind of like China's like the last they're the last, you know, option that they have, right? Because, you know, after all the tension and screw-ups that we've had with Russia and the European Union with them.
I actually disagree. I don't think China is the only option that Russia has.
Who else is there?
Because India. Because if you think about it, right, Russia has historically been one of India's biggest allies, right? And even in recent times, with the creation of the BrahMos missile, which is apparently the third fastest missile, I'm pretty sure. I think it's the third fastest. It's a collaboration between India and Russia, right? The BrahMos missile. I think it's the BrahMos 3. But yeah, it's one of the fastest missiles. It's really good technology. And in fact, the U.S. has bought a couple $1 billion worth of it as well, right? So with that alliance and ISRO being what it is, ISRO is a great space organization which has beat many world leaders to the chase, right? So Russia could have exploited that as well, and that's a safer bet because China has this historical tendency to just debt trap economies. They'll give you a lot of money or they'll give you a lot of deals and capital, right? And then they'll call in the favors, like they'll call back in the debt for land. And that there's a possibility that they could do that with Russia too. It's just not the safest bet. So that's why I feel like Russia should have looked for other opportunities like India's space program.
I mean, who knows if other countries can join this project?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Because of China's team up, a lot of countries in Asia are gonna join.
I don't know. I think
well, Asians don't have the power. First of all, okay.
I think if they
other
work
countries,
together,
which other country in Asia is gonna join China? South Korea?
I think
Japan?
I think the space race is completely different from what's going on globally. You know.
No, but it's just the association with China, because that's giving China power. The moment you get into a deal with China, even if it benefits both parties, China has leverage. And in no situation, especially because Asia is extremely volatile right now. Because if you look at countries like Bhutan and Nepal, they're completely they're sinking right now, right? you have there's reports of Nepali prime ministers getting honey trapped by Chinese
Chinese
ambassadors.
agents, right?
Yeah, yeah, which is crazy, and it's actually true. And there's reports of places like Pakistan that are completely debt trapped by China. So the concept of debt trapping is people are not realizing the magnitude of it, because China just calls in the debt and takes your land.
Yeah,
So
I think,
if
that's
you
not-
enter a
Russia,
deal,
Well,
I think
we-
Russia's just being aggressive right
No,
now.
no, that's
They-
never going to happen to Russia. First of all, the debt trap tactic is not going to happen to Russia, right?
it
I mean,
can
it
work
could.
on
We saw
Russia.
it- we saw
No,
it
no,
happen
it's not
in the
going to work on them,
90s.
bro. It's
No,
not.
we saw it happen in the 90s with them. That's why their economy tanked. So it could again happen.
When
with
you mean
China.
90s, what are you talking about? Like the collapse of Soviet Union? Or what?
No, so once the Soviet Union collapsed, what the Western powers did is they came into power and
Okay.
basically, told Russia how to privatize their economy. The issue with that was Western powers came in and basically sort of debt trapped Russia by, privatizing everything, and then the Russian economy basically had no revenue to gain from it. So what happened is, I think they have the ruble. That's their currency. Might be wrong, but the ruble
I think you're right. I
basically-
think you're right. Yeah.
The ruble basically lost all its power, and it just entirely collapsed the capitalistic ideology that Russia had at the time, and that's how Putin came into power. So it is possible that it can happen again. It might be in a different way. You never know with China, but yeah, it'll be interesting how this goes forward.
Well, I can't see China doing a debt trap on Russia at this point.
I see them do. I mean, they've done it on us.
Okay, what would they
basically.
do?
I don't know what they can do. They have.
I remember earlier.
Russia's
I
not
remember
powerful,
earlier
but Russia's not too powerful or too big, but they're powerful enough for China not to do that, right?
I don't think so. Their main sources of investments now are in volatile oil and natural gas regions.
Okay.
That's all they have in terms of
and
natural resources.
I mean, one of their main source of revenue is also weapons deals.
Yeah, okay. All right. So just three, but they're all pretty volatile in nature. And at some point there will be a sort of change in how society thinks, with clean energy coming into the US now. Who knows if that might make its way into Asia. It may take a couple decades, but I think Russia is not focusing enough on how to grow its economy like it did in the 2000s, and instead it's focusing on how can Putin maintain support and power and control over the Russian population.
I mean, that's their entire plan. For example, if you look at the Balkans, right? The China and Russia have an alliance now where they're increasing their footprint in Balkans because the U.S. stepped out of there, right? So I'm just saying, Putin and who's the Chinese dude? I can't say his name. What's his name? Yeah, that dude, right? See, those guys, they have a very expansionist outlook, and they're very authoritarian in in the way they manage their countries. So in general, this alliance could be scary in terms of expansion within Asia, because China already has significant control over a lot of East and South Asia. Russia has significant control over the Baltic countries, and also now they're growing their influence within Ukraine with all the new major military strategies that are implementing, right? So if these two guys come together with their very similar mindset, it's honestly a scary thing for Asia as a whole. And in fact, the European Union should also be concerned about it.
Yeah, I think NATO would definitely step in if there is huge action, if Russia and China collaborate on anything big. I don't think the space race is concerning them
Well,
too
NATO's
much.
not gonna do shit if they want to do a military exercise or anything with them. As long as
In
they
general,
don't attack-
NATO's not really an official thing. It's sure, it was created during World War II times, and it was a great approach and everything. But what has NATO done in the past 20 years? Where has NATO been in times of need?
What do you?
Did they get involved in Ukraine?
Nothing, because
No.
country
Listen.
vetoes
That's not the
it.
whole concept of it, right? The whole concept is you attack my ally, I'll attack you, right? You have a backing. What is it? 20 plus countries? That's a huge alliance. It's not a joke, bro. There's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of power involved. And it's a huge alliance, right? So if you go attack one European country, we all will come attack you. It's a huge alliance, and it's
True,
it's an alliance
but then
fear.
But remember, Russia also has significant allies, and so does China, and their
Yeah,
alliance could be scary.
Russia's allies are not as strong as the allies we have in NATO. Like, you understand that, right? That's why they're going to China.
I feel like they are, because if you think about it,
Who-
Russia
okay,
and China
name
themselves
some
are
of their
very
allies.
powerful.
Name some of
Pakistan,
Russia's allies.
Russia, China, Pakistan, North
Right.
Korea, right? Nuclear states,
excluding China.
right? North
Pakistan's
Korea
not a
and
huge
Pakistan.
country. Pakistan's not a huge country. It's
No,
not a powerful
I'm not
country.
talking about
Sort of
geography.
India.
Both of them are extremely powerful. India is not really an ally of China. I mean, for Russia, they are an ally.
For Russia.
But the moment that they
India
get involved
is-
with China, they're not going to get involved. So India is kind
India-
of like a neutral party.
Yeah, India is tied to Russia just because of the weapons deals, right? There's
Mhm.
nothing else because of decades of weapons sold to Russia from to India, whether it's the missile launchers or aircraft. You have to do servicing for all that, right? So
It's
that's
purely
why-
economic. It's purely economic.
right.
right?
So, I mean, Pakistan is. I would argue it's more under China's control than Russia. Russia has literally no one compared to what the allies in the Western world have.
No, what
Right.
I'm saying is if Russia allies with China, right,
That's
that
what I'm saying,
entire
yeah.
alliance
That's
can
why
be as
That's
powerful
why
as
Russia's
NATO.
going to China.
Yeah,
I
I'm
would
saying
still
that
argue
alliance
it's not,
is as powerful
I would
as
still
NATO.
argue if Russia partners with China, if they do military exercises, if they come up with a huge alliance, just two of them, it's not as big or powerful as what NATO is.
No, but then you have scary countries like Iran, North Korea, and Pakistan. All three of them are two of them are
Iran-
already nuclear states.
Iran-
Iran is an aspiring nuclear
Iran can be
state.
Yeah, but
squashed
Iran
within a month.
is.
You gotta understand that. Iran can be
True,
squashed
but I'm
within a month.
saying as an overall alliance, right? Like if all of these guys have a joint military pool, they have a
in term-
significant. They have more nukes than anyone else in the world.
I don't think it matters how many nukes you have at this point. We could destroy each other with about 10 of them.
Nuclears aren't meant to be used. It's a deterrent. Just remember that.
True.
Okay.
But the more nukes you have, the higher deterrence you have. That's how the world sees it. And Russia and China combined have way more nukes than the U.S. does.
Right, but it's not about the amount of nukes now. It's just everyone has enough to just destroy the world. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you can go build another 10,000 nukes. It doesn't matter. It's not going to increase your power because we on each side has enough nukes to destroy you. Okay. So at one point, if you want to go spend billions of dollars on your nuclear program, it's not going to be to develop missiles. It's going to be to provide, efficient energy. Okay. I mean, I see the Iran thing. That's Russia has been involved with Iran, but if they want to maybe get a slighter edge in terms of strength in alliances, then that's why they're going to China. But
Okay, so
They have no one
let's
else.
see. Do you see a next? I don't want to say Cold War, but some sort of, I guess, more military aggression in the next 4 years.
I think it already started. I think we're already in a state of a Cold War with Russia.
we are in a Cold War. Okay.
No, yeah,
That-
no doubt. That I didn't want to say Cold War for that reason. That's why I said military aggression, on the ground troops.
From which
not
which
in
parties?
combat with each other.
Like who and who?
We'll take Russia, China, and the U.S. between those three because right now they are the superpowers.
I do think that the
We are the
U.S.
only
will get involved
superpower,
with
by the way.
China.
Sorry.
Yeah,
say that
Russia
again?
and China are both not superpowers, but they're close
Okay, I mean,
competition,
they're,
right?
Yeah, they're closest in competition to us. That is not an ally of ours. So,
Yeah, but I would say I do see military aggression happening in the Chinese-South China Sea conflict, right?
That's-
yeah, we
I
can
mean,
talk
that's
about
already
that
happening,
another time.
right?
I'm
it's
just-
happening, and I feel like the U.S. will continue
I'm talking just
increasing
more on
military
Russia.
might there.
I'm just talking more than Russia and U.S. Do you see any
No.
military
Nope.
I don't really
Nope.
see it, no.
aggression between them?
Nope. Not
Okay.
gonna happen
No.
for decades. Nope.
All right. Yeah.
Russia
I mean, the
is
only-
too insignificant now. They're not as big as they
No,
were
yeah,
like the Soviet
definitely
Union.
not.
There's no way.
And especially
They
with
have-
Putin, like Putin's
They
on a
have
power
no
grab
natural
streak.
resources anymore. They have no
Exactly.
stable natural resources. Let me rephrase that.
Exactly, and the U.S. beat them to the oil reserves as well. So the U.S. has a lot more oil, and then Russia
we're
sold
also
Alaska
exporting more oil than we actually import from Middle East. Remember, like a few years
Imagine-
ago?
Imagine if
One of the
Russia
s-
didn't sell Alaska to us.
for exactly. That was one of the stupidest moves Russia could have done.
It was. I mean, Russia was huge in debt, man. They needed to sell it.
I guess, but like they could have, if they did some more like research within Alaska,
Yeah,
they
I
could have
mean-
capitalized on the oil over there.
No one knew oil was there until what, like 100 years after the U.S. purchased it. So, I mean, yeah, in hindsight, yeah, it's a great investment, but everything's in hindsight, isn't it?
hmm So
All right.
overall, I do think that Russia's and China's alliance is scary in multiple areas because it is a major threat to the U.S.
I would say in terms of
Right?
intelligence gathering, that would be scary. Like if you look at Iran, right? Whenever there's some military conflict, the next few weeks they'll start attacking our government websites. Same thing with Russia. You saw SolarWinds, Microsoft, the Outlook servers were hacked. China's doing the same thing in terms of stealing our intellectual property for designing their military aircraft. Like the F-22, it's the same thing as like I think the Sukhoi Su-25, right? The designs were the same. Even the F-35, right? They copied all of the designs. In terms of intelligence gathering, if they start to share intelligence, that is a big problem. But in terms of military might, it not a big problem. Just intelligence.
I mean,
gathering,
China's
probably.
strategy in general is just buy foreign products, disassemble them, and rebuild them as their own. That's their entire policy.
I think with China, there are a lot of issues on whether they can sustain the growth that they're on and be at the level the U.S. is right now. But in terms of Russia, I think the next like 5 years are just going to be focused on Putin gaining power again.
In terms of
Within-
military might, for the next 100 years, I don't think China can compete with the U.S. But in
No,
terms of
yeah,
economic
I don't-
mobility, I definitely think
tough.
that
No,
no.
I
In
think
terms of economy,
I
I think China can overtake.
I've researched some bit into China,
Mm-hmm.
and it's actually kind of frightening to see where China's heading in the future. It's not a good outlook. That's what I mean for them. There are some
Want to
things.
expand on that?
Maybe another time we can talk about China then.
All
I
right.
wanted to just keep this about Russia, but yeah, China has some problems of its own. I mean, mainly due to its population. There's a lot of problems that are coming with it that most people don't realize. But in terms of Russia, I think the main thing to focus on is, can Putin, I guess, sustain support within Russia? Of course, he'll be in power until he probably dies, but will he be able to, I guess, fully
No,
go-
Putin really needs to reevaluate his priorities
Yeah.
because what he needs to do is he needs to move away from this power grab mentality and start thinking about Russia's economy.
It'll be
Because
hard,
Russia
though,
has not been a
'cause-
GDP leader for the past like 10 years.
Mhm.
They're in the top 10 GDPs of the world, sure, but they're not in the top
No,
5
I mean, after
consistently.
2012 and that rigged or whatever rigged election that Putin did,
Mhm.
it's just been downhill from there in terms of the economy. for Russia.
2012? You mean
Yeah, in
Obama's
2000
second term?
Yeah, no, in 2000, no, not in terms of U.S. and Russia elections.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so Putin basically, I mean, it's not fully confirmed.
I mean, his
'cause-
his whole tactic, right, is to serve as prime minister, and until his term ends, switches to president, switches back to
Mhm.
prime minister. That's
yeah,
his whole.
so he will
loophole.
always be in power. It's just how much opposition will there be for him? I mean,
As
Navalny
as
is
long
a
as the
small-
oligarchs support him, he won't have any opposition, and that's
That
going
is
to be for a long
true.
time.
I mean, he also does kill the oligarchs if they ever go against him, as we've seen.
Right, he has the
multiple
support of the
times,
KGB and
but-
Kremlin, so
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know if Russia can also just like lay back from Ukraine. I mean, you saw it with the Minsk 2. I don't know if you remember that in 2015, where they signed the pact. You know, providing military destabilization within the Ukraine region, which basically didn't happen. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the coming years.
I do want the U.S. to get involved in Ukraine, however.
I don't think they will ever will. The
I
EU
think
will
we should
kick them
not.
out.
I don't think the U.S.
I
should
think
be
the bu-
involved at all.
Or the
No, I
EU
think
will force some like sanctions on us or something if we get involved. There's no way we can get into the Ukraine without their approval.
See,
But why is the
What do
EU
you, what do you
affected
mean
by
involved?
this,
Wait,
though?
Christian, when you mean involved, wait, what do you mean?
Yeah. Because if Russia gains control over Ukraine, right? That's significant influence
Look,
to the
we
European
can sell
Union.
them as much as missiles and arms we want, but in terms of involvement, sending our troops there, that's a big no-no. That's not going to happen, and that shouldn't actually happen.
I feel like the Biden administration might do it.
No,
Because the Biden administration has always been anti-Russian aggression within the Ukrainian region.
public
That would
sentiment
be-
will be 90% against that. We're trying to
Yeah.
get out of Afghanistan. We're trying to get out of many parts of the Middle East. You think that we would want to go to Ukraine and try to increase tension with Russia again? That's not going to happen. Biden would not want that on his presidency.
Okay, so what do you think the solution for this is? Because
The
Russia's not
Solution
going
is
to
to
back
let
down.
them solve
Ukraine
it
is
out.
not-
We don't have
Yeah,
to be the
it's-
policeman of the world,
we
bro.
can't. Yeah, we can't do anything with this. Otherwise, the U.S. will just be seen as getting involved in another war where they have no real, service in.
But they've already had that reputation for like 3 other wars.
Yeah, and they want to stop that. That's why we're getting out of the Afghan war. That's why, you know, we got out of the Vietnam War back in the day. I mean, Korean War is a whole nother story, but
Yeah,
we
but I'm
don't,
saying by the
we
time we
want to
pulled
be,
out of Afghan, it was already like a wasteland.
yeah,
Like we
that's true.
ruined
So we don't,
Afghanistan,
No,
we
no,
ruined
we've been there
Iraq.
for
To the
we've been there
Ukraine.
for almost more than 2 decades, right? We
So
all
now
know
get
why we're
into the
there.
Ukraine.
We all come up with the some story that the Taliban is still strong, the Al Qaeda is still strong, and that's when we need troops there. That's all bullshit. Okay, we have to get out of these areas because we need to bring our troops home. We can't risk putting thousands of troops in Ukraine. I mean
Our
there's
goal
no
as a
reason to
military, yeah, our goal as a military shouldn't be to destabilize regions so that other, countries gain power. It should be to provide peace and provide support to other nations.
Why instigate more conflict?
Exactly. That's the main issue. That was the main issue, at least with the U.S. military. I don't know where it's at right now with them pulling out of the Afghan conflict zone, but
So can
yeah,
the U.S. afford Russia gaining control over Ukraine?
I think so. I mean, I don't think there'd be, if they gain control of Ukraine, there are going to be huge repercussions coming from it. I mean, definitely the U.S. will be involved, and definitely the EU will start to be involved because it is right on the border, right?
I don't think the U.S. would care, but it comes to this, right? If the if the EU has a problem with this, then we're gonna have a problem with it. That's how it works.
Yeah.
So to answer your
because
question, then
it's
yeah,
right
we're
on
probably
the
gonna have
border,
a problem
right?
with it.
Because Ukraine is right now the buffer between Russia and
Oh,
the
it's not.
EU.
It's not even like a
EU.
flat border. It's kind of like bulging into the EU zone, right? So that's why it's a huge problem, and it's actually the same thing, right? So Ukraine's like this oval shape that's kind of sandwiched between Russia and EU. If either party gets control, they have like a good amount of land intruding into each, area of their of the country. So that's why it's a very strategic landmass over there. So that's why they're both sides are. It's kind of like in a tug of war, between the EU and Russia, for Ukraine.
So basically, what you're saying is leave the situation as is and let it figure itself out.
Yep.
I mean, so the U.S. does what it does best. We're sending arms to Ukraine. We gave them a lot of weapons. It's not happening now. We've been doing it for quite some time. That's all we can do. We're not gonna send
As
troops.
long as it doesn't affect us domestically, we will never get involved in it, and we should never get involved in it.
Yeah,
That's my point.
Maybe to an extent, but
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if they take control of Ukraine, that's a whole different story. But right now, I mean, it's been 7 years. There's been no movement on either side. The Russians
See,
are
but you're
pulling back.
thinking of this like a government, right? Sorry, you're thinking of this like a citizen,
No, I'm
right?
thinking
Think
of this
about it like a
politically.
government.
No, I'm thinking of this to maintain relations with our allies. Do you know how much hatred there would be if we just went into Ukraine without any support from any other country?
yeah,
It would deteriorate everything
on
we've
what
worked for.
grounds would we have to go to Ukraine?
Yeah.
We won't get UN's approval. We won't get EU's approval. Like we can't just go barge in with our troops, and no one's gonna allow that.
That's their own war. We shouldn't get involved in other people's war.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. And we did get involved in Korean War, so
Yeah, I mean that there was huge protests against that back then as well. So I don't agree with us going into the Korean War back then. Don't agree with us going into the Vietnam War. I don't agree with us in the Afghan War. I mean, yeah, we've been butting heads for the past 50 years. I don't think there's any more reason for us to do it.
Yeah, it all comes down to interest, right? We don't have any interest in Ukraine, to be honest, right? If you go to the Middle East, yeah, we have a lot of interest. We have oil interest. We have weapon deals interest. But in terms of Ukraine, we don't have many interest in there. Yeah, that's what it comes to, right? Governments run the world like it's a business, and to be fair, we don't have any business in Ukraine, and we shouldn't be putting troops fairly. I don't think we should even be supplying them with weapons. But of course, we're profiting from that. But I think it's their problem to solve and EU's problem to solve. We don't have to be involved in everything in the world that's happening.
And we've kind of seen what happens if we get involved. It kind of turns back onto us.
We should be
Eventually.
repairing our relationship with Russia, and going into Ukraine is not going to do that at all. So that's that's the EU's problem to solve. And
I
that's Russia's
I am
problem to
kind
solve.
of surprised that Biden isn't trying to figure out ways to improve relations in China and
Like he's
Russia.
straining them actually. A lot of his policy is straining a relationship with
Yeah,
Russia, and
it's
that's
it's
kind of why
interesting
Russia is like moving towards Chinese.
because everyone expected like the trade deal with China to like get resolved very quickly, and for Russia to have better relations with the U.S. But it seems to be the same way it was when Trump left.
It's going to be hard to have good relations with China because they actually have a leverage. They have a lot of leverage over us in a lot of spaces. So
Hmm.
it's not going to be easy for them to bend them to our will or to our interests. We're going to have to sacrifice certain things to get some sort of to get on some sort of good terms. Okay, people don't realize this now, but China has already beat us. Okay, so not in military might, but in terms of economic power. Okay, so
In the
if we
next 10 years, China's gonna have a higher GDP than the U.S.
probably not 10 years, we're going to have it in like 5 or 6 years.
I have some hesitation about whether they actually will. I mean, in the past, yeah, they've shown that they have the growth potential, but there are issues with China. But I think,
See,
yeah, that's a time
the-
for.
The only
No,
way
they have virtually similar GDPs right now. Like
GDP doesn't
China's GDP
matter. Yeah, there's also geographic location in terms of what's going on within China. Can they sustain the growth that they've had? 'Cause
And, you
why
know-
can they not?
I understand the whole GDP thing, but there are many studies that show that GDP doesn't really represent like a country's economic
Past
power.
performance doesn't always represent what's going to happen in the future as well. So
Yeah, and if you want to deter China's like growth and economic power, the only way you can do that is to grow domestic jobs and bring jobs back. Right? We need to bring all the manufacturing jobs back. We need to bring all the blue collar jobs that are wiped out in the Midwest. We need to bring all that back, and I think that's what Biden's going to do with his infrastructure plan. So if we
That's going to be very difficult. First off, that's going to cause inflation, right? Because manufacturing domestically in the United States is just very hard due to a bunch of minimum wage laws and higher living expenses. It's going to be very expensive and costs are going to increase, right? That's where
if-
China has the advantage because
Honestly,
they have like a
if it's-
control over prices.
if it's a cost that's worth it for our future, I think, yeah, screw it.
No, not
Our
just that.
economy can go into
America is
shambles.
very behind on that because let's say we do bring in manufacturing domestically, right?
Our-
Let's take a look at China and America. See,
Uh-huh.
the dollar is the universal currency, right? So the U.S. doesn't really have the flexibility to devalue the dollar whenever they want. But in China, however, the yuan is not the global currency
Reserve.
of the world. So China has significant flexibility to do whatever they want to the yuan. In some years, you can take a look at how China prints money. They'll print ridiculous amounts of money, making the yuan almost worthless. So imports are ultra cheap, and the global economy
think-
hyper imports.
I think
So-
how about we save this conversation for another time? Just like on China specifically.
All right.
Otherwise, we'll be here for another hour.
Yeah, but there isn't much more to talk about Russia. So
Yeah,
I think
I think-
the ground line is the U.S. should not get involved in Russia. Russia should focus more on economic development rather than power grab tactics, and they should focus. They should be wary about their Chinese alliance and think about it a lot more. I think those were the
yeah.
main
Also,
points.
just in terms of Biden, it'll be interesting to see how relations unfold and
Yeah.
how that has an effect on the ruble, especially since it didn't have a great effect last time on it.
Yep. So we do need to kind of like stabilize this Cold War situation as well.
Yeah.
Cold War is
But yeah,
always going to exist.
I think that does it for us today. So yeah, thanks for listening in. If you're on Spotify, make sure to follow us and listen for new episodes. Or if you're on YouTube, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And we will see you guys next week with some financial updates.